the Association Secretary of the Firefighters Association of the state of New York.
Okay, great. So it looks like there was a gathering on Saturday in Canandaigua to talk about priorities for the legislative session. And it looks like they said they need equitable firefighter injury benefits and volunteer firefighters from Monroe, Ontario, and Onondaga counties to meet with elected officials to discuss legislative priorities. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, what that means?
Sure. The Firefighters Association has a grassroots legislative development process. What we do is we meet around the state with members of the association, and we get input from them based on their perspectives. And then once a year in November, we bring everybody into Albany, and all these regional perspectives kind of get put on the table. And from those items, we develop our legislative program, or as we call it, the legislative scorecard. So it's a sort of bottom-up process.
It's a bottom-up process. So do you know what all happened at the meeting?
Unfortunately, I was not at the meeting, but in general, the way it works is it's an open forum. So any member of the association can attend these local regional meetings and put something forth, that they think needs to be addressed, or in a situation that they themselves have identified. It gets talked, amongst the people in attendance at the local legislative meeting, and then they take a vote. And basically, at the end of the day, hopefully they have 1, 2, 3, 4 legislative initiatives or ideas that would be then elevated to the state level and possibly become part of the overall Firefighters Association legislative program.
So it looks like part of this is about that currently volunteer firefighters, if they're injured in the line of duty, they will receive some money to help with their medical bills, except it looks like it's less than other workers and volunteer emergency responders get. Can you kind of speak to that, like how much less and why, and what would the new legislation change about that?
Sure. Volunteer firefighters are covered under the Volunteer Firefighter Benefit Law. So if we should get hurt in the line of duty, if we should break a bone on a call, we would be covered. Our workers' compensation would be covered under Volunteer Firefighter Benefit Law. Now, if you were working in a factory and you got hurt, you would be covered by workers' comp. And currently, the amount of money that is given to a volunteer firefighter who gets hurt on the job is less than a worker who, under workers' comp would get. So all we're asking for is parity. We just want to get the same amount, in terms of compensation if we get hurt while being a volunteer firefighter.
Okay, it seems reasonable, but you never know. Ongoing, it looks like another priority for the legislation for 2023 is ongoing recruitment and retention efforts. I know you and I have kind of talked about this before, but let's revisit that. Why do we need recruitment and retention efforts throughout the state and in our region, in the Finger Lakes region?
Unfortunately, for the past several decades, we've seen a significant decline in the number of individuals becoming volunteer firefighters. Just as sort of a point of reference, back in the early 2000s, it was estimated that there was about 120,000 volunteer firefighters across the state. Today, we're probably somewhere in the 75 to 80,000 range. Now, at the same time that we're seeing less people becoming volunteer firefighters, the number of calls from most departments is going up. The complexity of those calls is increasing. And more, the state is using the volunteer firefighter force as sort of as an emergency response team. So, departments from the capital region here in Albany went out to Buffalo to help them with the snow event. Many times, if there's a weather event on Long Island, departments will send people from around the state. So we have less people, more calls, more complex mission, and we're being sent outside our own communities to provide fire and emergency response. So you can see how that becomes a terrible cycle. It puts, you have less people to do more work. It puts an extra hard burden on those people, which means that they tend to burn out quicker and leave the volunteer fire service. So it's it's a negative spin, so to speak. So what we've been trying to do for many, many years is just get the word out there that 75 to 80% of all the fire and emergency response in New York is done by volunteers. Contrary to popular belief, people see Backdraft and they see Chicago Fire, and they drive by their local firehouse and think that there's a crew of paid career firefighters there. But the exact opposite is true. Most communities depend on volunteer fire and EMS to meet their needs. So, we are just trying to get the word out that we need people of all types, of all skill sets. You don't have to be the person pulling a hose into a burning building. There are dozens and dozens of jobs in a volunteer fire department, both on the active response side and on the administrative side. Frankly, you might be a bookkeeper. You might have some medical knowledge. You might be an RN. Whatever skill set you have, whatever bit of time you have, we will take it and put it to good use gladly.
Moving along to public safety and building code compliance issue. It looks like it says a group of legislative initiatives related to keeping the public and first responders safe. The legislative package includes updating fire and building codes, supporting enforcement officers, amending the penal code to add endangering the welfare of occupants, fire and emergency personnel, and ensuring the safe use of lithium ion batteries. That's a lot. Can you break down what does that actually, what does this all mean?
You hit a couple of different things there.
Yeah. Well, I didn't. I'm just reading from the press release. So they hit a couple different things there.
The Firefighters Association is very involved and very knowledgeable in building code issues because they play a direct impact on volunteer firefighters and career firefighters being able to do their jobs efficiently and safely. Many times you have people modify their residences, whether they be single family residences or multifamily residences. They modify them without getting the proper permits and filing the proper plans. So unfortunately, when something happens like a fire and we have to go in and search for occupants, or we have to go in and find the seat of the fire to extinguish it, we come into obstacles like walls, doorways, sometimes, where a hallway should be, but it isn't because of these illegal modifications. So, we are very strong advocates that the building codes must be strong. They must reflect fire safety, and they must be followed. Too often, firefighters go into a burning structure, and when we walk in the front door, we just don't go in, willy-nilly. We have a general sense of the layout of the building based on the type of building it is. So we make decisions as we're proceeding down a hallway with little to no visibility, where that hallway should go, where doorways should be, where windows should be if we need to exit quickly. And when you have these illegal modifications, all bets are off. We often go into a structure, and sadly, many times volunteer and career firefighters lose their lives because of these illegal modifications.
Absolutely. And what about the lithium iron batteries?
Well, lithium ion batteries.
I said iron, lithium ion, sorry.
Lithium ion batteries are becoming more and more popular, both on a small scale in things like scooters and hoverboards, and on large scales, golf carts, automobiles. They do present a bit of a fire safety challenge. They're relatively new technology. So at this point in time, as we are learning as firefighters how to address issues involving lithium ion batteries, we strongly encourage people to do a few very simple things that will make it safer for them and safer for firefighters should we have to respond to an emergency involving a lithium ion battery. First and foremost, always use a product that is certified by, say, Underwriters Laboratory or some valid testing facility. Always use the battery that comes with the appliance. So if you get a lithium ion battery powered scooter, don't try to save a few bucks and buy a replacement battery on the internet. You can buy a lot of stuff on the internet, but much of it is, cheaper quality. They're not engineered properly. So, only use replacement batteries that come from the company of the appliance that you're using. Use the charger that comes with the scooter or the hoverboard or whatever the product is. Too often people lose the charger, and again, they'll go online and they'll buy a cheap charger. Those things, have a possibility of overheating or causing the battery to overcharge and overheat and catch fire. So, we encourage people to use a little common sense. Buy a good quality product, charge it with the charger that came with it, charge it in the manner that the instructions tell you to charge it. Keep it away from any combustible materials. So, it's an emerging technology that we're all going to have to learn, because it is very popular and it's growing in a lot of different devices.
All right. Well, that answers that. Thank you. Moving along, it looks like they're asking to amend the mental hygiene law in relation to the quote First Responder Peer Support Program Act. It says that a 2017 study found that more firefighters and police officers died by suicide than in the line of duty. A study further found that these first responders, including EMS, are at an increased risk for mental illness such as depression and PTSD. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's an unfortunate thing that goes along with the job of being a firefighter or a law enforcement officer or an emergency medical person. We see things that most normal people don't see. We interact with our friends, our family, and neighbors on some of the worst days that they have, and it builds up. Even the most seasoned, somewhat hardened firefighter, it gets to you. You wouldn't be doing this if you didn't have a significant level of compassion and wanting to be there when people need you. But it takes its toll, and everybody handles it differently. Some emergency first responders can go an awful long time and deal with it in their own ways. Other first responders, it has an unfortunate negative effect on them, and it starts to prey on them emotionally and mentally. So, it's an area that's getting a lot more attention these days, thankfully. And it's one thing to get attention. It's another thing to set up mechanisms and processes that people can get help when they need it. So that's what this legislation is. It's a solid initial step towards having those mechanisms and programs available to first responders when they need them.
Absolutely. I think you did a great job. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Do you think that there's anything else that we should be looking at with this? Anything that we missed?
Well, I think, I try to work this in every time I talk to the media, because it's critically important. I would encourage anyone who has the slightest curiosity, the slightest inclination to want to become a first responder, a volunteer firefighter, or volunteer EMT, take a few minutes out of your schedule, go down to your local fire department. I recommend on a night that they're training or they're doing a class, and see what it's all about. You may find that it winds up being some of the most rewarding, minutes of your life, and can, dictate a path that is extremely rewarding. It's not for everybody, but it is for a lot of people. And frankly, we need people. We can have all the greatest technology in the world, but if we don't have dedicated men and women who are trained, willing, and able to respond when necessary, the technology has no value. It's a hands-on, full contact sport, and we need people. We're hurting today.